Hi, this is Darcy Hawker, and this is about dress and appearance and dress code. The U.S. Supreme Court has consistently declined to address the issue of dress code in schools. The First Amendment states that dress may be regulated, but if it violates students' rights by being vague or by failing to demonstrate a connection to any type of disruption, it will not meet court scrutiny. But advocates say, well, it's a form of self-expression. It can be argued that it is, and it reflects student cultures. Therefore, there has to be material or substantial disruption to the educational process. But the question is this: what we consider disruption is subjective, and it's left up to interpretation at times. So if we take a look at these three pictures, if you take a look at the girl, could her hairstyle be considered offensive, or her shirt? What about wearing yoga pants? That could be seen as possibly indecent exposure if it shows the various parts of the human genitals. And what about the picture in the middle? That could also be seen as indecent exposure. And that brings up the laws in Kansas. Indecent exposure is the deliberate exposure in public or in view of the general public by a person of a portion or portions of his or her body, and in circumstances where the exposure is contrary to local moral and other standards of appropriate behavior. Social and community attitudes to the exposing of various body parts and laws covering what is referred to as indecent exposure, and they vary significantly in different countries. It ranges from prohibition of exposure of genital areas, buttocks, or female breasts. The applicable standard of decency is generally that of the local community. So your thoughts on this? A Montana legislative panel has moved to kill a bill that would tighten the state's indecent exposure law and consequently ban some provocative clothing, i.e. yoga pants. Members of the House Judiciary Committee voted unanimously to table the bill. The proposal would have expanded the definition of indecent exposure to include garments that give the appearance of a person's genitals. Moore said that the bill could outlaw some provocative clothing, and later said he thinks that yoga pants should be illegal in public. Although members of the committee giggled about the bill, no discussion was allowed before the voice call vote to table it. The bill was drafted in response to a naked bicycling event in Missoula last summer. So, is it justifiable to censor clothing when 1. Evidence of material or substantial disruption to the educational process, 2. Violation of health and safety standards, 3. It draws unusual attention to the student's anatomy, 4. It is required to protect the safety of students, wearing long jewelry around equipment, for instance. Number 5, it's necessary to protect health. Number 6, it doesn't meet the standard of the community. And number 7, dress that results in disruption to the orderly administration of the school. I would say these are all reasons that it is justifiable to censor clothing. So, once your school has set that standard, then what do? School dress code should be approved by the Board of Education with all stakeholders involved in creating that policy. I have included our school's dress code. Appropriate dress for students. A student's personal appearance is the responsibility of the student and/or his parents or guardians, but it becomes the responsibility of the school administration when it disrupts learning. School administration reserves the right to make decisions concerning the appropriateness of a student's attire, and it reserves the right to have a student remove any item deemed inappropriate for school or sent home to change their attire. There are several landmark cases involving dress. Tinker versus Des Moines is one of them in 1969, and in that famous decision, the court ruled that public school officials could not censor student expression, i.e. the wearing of black armbands. In Newsom versus Albemarle County School Board, the controversy arose after school officials forced student Alan Newsom to quit wearing his NRA t-shirt, which depicted 3 silhouettes of men holding guns and bore the message NRA Sports Shooting Camp. The school policy prohibited messages on clothing, jewelry, and personal belongings that relate to weapons. In its December 2003 decision, the Fourth Circuit determined that the policy was too broad and was not necessary to prevent disruptions at school. The court explained that the language of the school dress code would prohibit clothing bearing the state seal of Virginia, which depicts a woman holding a spear. In the U.S. versus O'Brien, other courts have applied a test developed from the U.S. Supreme Court's 1968 decision on draft card burning to determine whether a school dress code is constitutional. Under the O'Brien test, a school dress code or uniform policy is constitutional if it, number 1, is authorized under state law, number 2, advances an important government interest, number 3, is not related to the suppression of free expression, and number 4, only incidentally restricts free expression in a minimal fashion. Another landmark case would be the Bethel School District versus Frazier, which allowed a school to punish a student for giving a vulgar speech before the student assembly. Some courts will use the Frazier precedent to prohibit students from wearing any clothing that contains vulgar, lewd, or plainly offensive expression. Many school districts have turned to dress codes and uniforms to promote a better learning environment. They argue that these policies decrease tensions and reduce socioeconomic differences and enhance safety. The standards that I felt belonged with dress code would be standard 1A. As a future administrator, I see the need for a school to have a set dress code in place that is created and carried out by all that are involved. And also standard 3C. Although it's just a small part of the big educational picture, ensuring that you have a policy in place promotes the well-being of the school unit.